My name is James, and this is my review on You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To by Knocked Loose. This is the third studio album amongst an array of single releases, EPs, and split releases from American hardcore band Knocked Loose, but it's their first featuring new rhythm guitarist and backing vocalist Nico Calderon. My initial thoughts on the first listen through was that this entire album was very reminiscent on early 2010s sort of beatdown era of the Acacia strain, with a good dose of chaotic hardcore from the likes of The Chariot. The production is huge and really modern, but not too clean and lifeless. And there's actually a lot of dynamic range throughout the entire album, which is seldom found in modern metal. Produced and mixed by Drew Falk, who has built up a pretty solid name for himself over the past 10 to 15 years in the modern metal producer scene, having worked with the likes of Motionless in White, Beartooth, and A Day to Remember, but also somewhat surprisingly Disturbed, Lil Wayne, and Lil Peep. There's absolutely no shortage of modern metal production tropes, like in opening track Thirst, when the breakdown hits and there's that big bass drop to accompany it, like in Slaughterhouse 2, where there's that sort of slight moment of a demo guitar tracking riff that then transitions into the fully produced riff, and of course the 5 seconds or so of a country folk style song at the end of Take Me Home. However, just because these tropes are used doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. They're definitely being used very well and at the right time, and they're not also being overused, other than maybe the bass drops, which means that when they are being used, they kind of add this little extra fun moments for us as the listeners. When it comes to the instrumentation, I think for the majority of hardcore bands, it's usually the guitar tone and the vocal style that really set the soundscape for a song or an entire album or EP. And I think with this album, there's absolutely no exception to that rule. And boy, does it make it apparent. The only way to really describe the guitar tone is that of the buzzing of a very active insect's nest. And the high-pitched yells that dominate the majority of this album almost invoke the scene of a toddler running away from said active nest. I think the drums have the right amount of character and punchiness. The one thing that really stood out to me was the snare drum sound, which is almost reminiscent of the dreaded St. Anger snare drum. However, it seems to work really well. The growling bass tone is mostly felt and not heard, but it definitely gets its time to shine in Don't Reach for me. There's also a really awesome synth sound that gets used in The Calm That Keeps You Awake, which is a really nice surprise at this point in the album. There's absolutely no doubt when it comes to the yelled vocals that we get from lead vocalist Brian Garris. They just work really, really well and somehow are mixed in such a way that doesn't induce an overwhelming amount of ear fatigue, particularly when listening to this album on earphones. It's hard to say exactly where we're experiencing the backing vocals from Isaac Hale and Nick Calderon. I'm going to assume that they are some of the more sort of uncontrolled high-pitched yells and the deep growly vocals that we get to emphasize some of the key lyrical phrases throughout the entire album, like Can't Hide From the Truth in Piece by Piece, and Completely Devoid of Bliss or Drowning in the Waves in The Calm That Keeps You Awake. The featured scream vocals that we get from Poppy on Suffocate do work really well, even though they are kind of in the same register as Garris's. However, I do think it is the spoken word passage that we get from Poppy in the bridge section that really makes the feature really special. The featured vocals that we get from Chris Motionless from Motionless in White are fine, but to be honest, this song is one of my least favorite on the entire album. The lyrics are fairly generic, sort of anti-establishment themed, and to be honest, for me, this entire song feels more of a nod to the original Slaughterhouse, which is featured on Motionless in White's album, scoring The End of the World. The album's lyrical themes revolve around pain and loss and abuse, but also the longing for freedom from this suffering and sometimes the pursuit of revenge. There's also many references to roots and waves that I think tie together some of the songs in a really interesting way. In this particular subgenre of metal, I think songs are more or less written with a mood in mind, rather than writing traditionally great songs. And I think the band has really achieved this super well with the connecting lyrical themes throughout many of the songs, but also the overall loudness of the album. However, there definitely are moments like in Don't Reach For Me and Slaughterhouse 2, which do lean more in the direction of a traditional song structure, particularly featuring choruses that are more of a melodic chord progression. These moments do act as a little bit of a reprieve from the chaotic barrage soundscape that is 98% of the album, which is not a bad thing. Some standout tracks for me are definitely Don't Reach For Me. This one just ticks all of the boxes. It's got, big riffs, catchy chorus, hard-hitting breakdown, and I really enjoyed that rhythm section break where we finally get to hear the bass guitar tone. Another standout moment for me was the connecting moments between Don't Reach For Me, Moss Covers All, and Take Me Home. I just loved these little moments between ending a song and starting the next one that were really unexpected, particularly on multiple listens. So I'm going to rate You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To a very strong 8 to a decent 9 out of 10. But most importantly, what do you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments down below. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out one of these other videos appearing before me, and you'll catch me in the next one.